Good morning, my friend and earthly neighbor, and welcome to Namaste today, an enlightening way to begin your weekday. I'm your heartfelt host and your sensei to serious joy, Christopher Witecki. This audio blogcast is for Thursday, March 30th, 2017. Welcome back, my friend. Namaste. I have to say, today's energy is going to feel a lot better than it has been in the last few days. The beginning of Aries has been sluggish, it's been difficult, and with Venus retrograde, it has been confusing. In today's zodiac weather, I'll tell you where the planets are and what today's goal is. And later in your tea time, since Venus is retrograde, I thought it was time to talk about Soulmate Sagas. The stories of our past life husbands and wives are all coming to the surface. But first, let's take a look at today's moods and your zodiac weather. This zodiac weather is for Thursday, March 30th, 2017. And my global forecast for the Earth is sunny and manifesting today. We finally come out of the first decan of the sun in Aries, and the moon is in Taurus to make sure those manifestations come to hatch. Let's take a look at the planets. Today is a day of manifestation, my friend, and this is after climbing out of some sort of an Aries rut. We've all been feeling it, especially after last weekend as the Sun and Venus kind of crossed each other. Things have felt sluggish and sticky, but today you may finally see the light at the end of the tunnel, or at least you'll come out of the ditch. Step 10 rules the day. Step 10 is I manifest, and that means your heart and your boundaries are holding space for a better life that your heart wants. That's the simplicity of it, for a simple, better life. Now, our minds, on the other hand, Mercury, is at step 28, which means at the same time, we're committing to a feeling that we want to feel every day in our life. And it really is a feeling, not necessarily a specific target. So today with the moon in Taurus on top of this, it's kind of a triple threat. There's tons of manifestation energy going on. Now, most of this manifestation, in my opinion, is a new foundation. Because we're in Aries, this is a new foundation of ego. And because Venus is retrograde, this is a rebuilt ego. This is an ego where we're looking at the idea of what ego should stand for in the first place. Now, speaking of Venus retrograde, Venus is now retrograde at step 1 Aries. Step 1 is I love. And from now until Saturday, you will be regurgitating past life lover stories or stories of current life love or how you love yourself. So the whole planet might be asking a lot of important questions to their heart in the next couple days about love and about where love is going. In fact, you're likely to come to some sort of interesting conclusion. That's because the asteroid, Pallas Athena, has now finally moved into Aries herself. And as the weekend progresses, Venus will cross over Pallas. Now, Pallas is basically the creative problem solver. I think of Pallas as the wise owl of the zodiac. It kind of shows up, troubleshoots, figures out what the issue is, and then comes up with creative problem solving to kind of break through the issue. Now, Pallas has actually been in Pisces for the last 3 months. That's how long Pallas stays in a sign, since December 29th. And so we've been creative problem solving about our spiritual direction. We've been creative problem solving about what our life purpose is and our path. And now that Pallas moves to Aries, it's time to get to business, which is great. But before it really gets started with the reorganization and problem solving of our ego problems, Pallas and Venus will come together. Which means, in simple terms, I think people are going to get to the bottom of what's working or not working when it comes to love or comes to loving yourself, or both. And that's a big part of today's topic later in our tea time. Now, the moon, as I said, is in Taurus, and early this morning crosses over Mars in Taurus, which means you're going to feel this real heave-ho to move forward today. And you should move forward in the things that are of value. You should absolutely not spend any time and energy with things that are not of value. And because Mars is at step 14, this represents a new chapter for you in whatever you're manifesting. A new chapter or a new value, a new deal. It could be a new act in the story. But there's definitely a turning point emotionally, particularly by the end of the day, as far as how you feel about what's manifesting and what's moving forward. So feelings are grounded and feelings are progressive. However, I do have to report that overnight, old Black Lilith moved to step 5 Sagittarius. She was at step 4, and I had reported all sorts of fears of things breaking down or falling apart. That's typical of step 4. Now that she's at step 5, you're going to have fears come up that are related to mind games, fears related to mental illness, fears related to miscommunication, fears related to false information, or fears of being disconnected from somebody. And remember, if you have irrational fears coming up, the best thing to do is just face them, protect yourself, come up with a backup plan, and when you've done everything you can do, try to let that fear go. Lots of us are purging these old fears so we can move on to the real business of our spiritual story. Now, speaking of spiritual story, there's a whole bunch of soulmate stuff going on right now, so why not go steep yourself some tea, and let's have our daily tea time. Hello, my friend, and welcome to our tea time. Today's tea time topic is Soulmate Sagas. As you know, Venus is retrograde right now, and Venus is associated with love because Venus is how we open up to love. Venus is how we like to be loved. And quite often, Venus is what we expect when it comes to our own personal love story. So Venus reveals a lot. And when she's moving backwards, it means we are re-exploring our love stories, re-exploring what we're willing to open up to. Now, Venus is at step 1. And in my step astrology approach, step 1 is I love. Particularly, I love myself. This is when we begin to love ourselves. Technically, we start to really fall in love with others at step 21, but that's a whole nother story. Step 1 is I love, how I love myself, and basically how we love ourselves to the extent of what sort of relationships do we allow ourselves to be in, of course, based on how well we actually love ourselves or don't love ourselves. Now, Venus currently is conjoining Pallas Athena. It's Athena in Greek mythology. And Pallas Athena is an asteroid. And it really represents kind of the wise owl in us. In fact, when I hear descriptions or read descriptions of Pallas, I kind of think of Maude from the old TV show. You know that character Maude? Super strong woman who's got her shift together and gets to the bottom of things. That's the Pallas energy. And so when Pallas conjoins a planet, that's exactly what happens. We get to the bottom. We find the wisdom. We open up and see, what are we not normally seeing here? What's not working here? And of course, because Pallas is conjuncting Venus at step 1, and they come together at step 0 on Saturday, so they will dead conjoin on Saturday, between now and then, you will likely be getting to the bottom of your love story and the relationships you have been in, and even on a deeper level, how you have failed to love or successfully love yourself. Now, Pallas is also known for our defensiveness. Okay, so when we get accused of something, it's our Pallas that comes up to sort of defend us. So a lot of defensiveness may come up about love or about yourself in the next 3 days. You might be way off on theory and obsessed on understanding why something is happening. And of course, underneath all of this is a desire to create a problem solve. Pallas wants to get to the bottom of it once and for all. So there is self-love in the air, or the question of self-love, in the next couple days. Another interesting transit, which is worth bringing up with a Soulmate Saga topic, is Juno. Juno's also an asteroid. Juno's currently in Capricorn. Juno represents kind of where our ideal, more adult, realistic relationship with things are. So after we, go after the high school jock or the cheerleader and get our heart broken and then realize, okay, I need something that really suits me, that's the Juno energy in you. And Juno was the wife of Jupiter. So she's had to deal with the biggest planet in the solar system. And, she's become kind of practical. So this is a relationship. This tells us where relationships will really work the best in our natal chart. Well, currently Juno is transiting Capricorn and conjoining Pluto. Pluto, of course, is the planet of transformation and exposure. So this means that as you are getting to the bottom with your wise owl of Pallas about self-love, Juno is also looking to reestablish where the ideal relationship boundaries should be. That's what Pluto really is, are our boundaries. So you're going to find that your old ideal view of relationships or love kind of gets torn down in some ways. If nothing else, it gets exposed. You start to see really what is ideal, and you start to see really what is not ideal in your life. And so this can bring up, because Juno is associated with this, it can bring up bitterness, it can bring up jealousy. So in simple terms, between now and Sunday, everyone is prone for defensiveness, bitterness, and jealousy if you have those issues and storylines, in your spiritual story. So at this time, with Venus retrograde in general, our soulmate stories are coming up, and that means that we are, if you're currently in a relationship and it's a soulmate, it's now becoming tense, or the issue is coming up. If you're without someone, you're probably about to draw in a soulmate. If you just did 20 laps around the track with a soulmate, you might be prepared to let that soulmate go. Whenever we're in Venus retrograde, this is the time where we basically swap mates, change relationship status. At the core, we're changing how we want to be loved and what we're willing to open up to. Now, if you've had a reading with me, you've kind of heard this speech before, but soulmates come for a number of reasons. First of all, soulmate you can tell is a soulmate because of a certain feeling, a weird sparkly feeling is the way I feel when I first meet them. You get this deja vu that you've known them before, usually goosebumps and all sorts of synchronicities and things like that. And of course, this totally excites us because, human beings actually don't get along that well very often. So when you meet someone out of nowhere that you get along with, it's damn exciting. But, they come for a number of reasons. One of the things I've found is that when you meet a soulmate, you always feel the love, no matter what. Even if, they killed you in the last life, the first thing you feel is the love. And when I first met what I call past life wives, I would always feel the love. And when I was young, I was like, oh my God, I'm in love. And I would think that I'm in love with that person. Truth is, you got to spend some time to unfold the story. And the story may be for a number of things. You may be continuing a love story from a past life. That's one of the options that does have. Sometimes when love is interrupted, one of the partner dies of a disease or something, it gets interrupted, they're going to pick it up. And sometimes the love story itself is what you pick up. Sometimes the soulmate is never available. This is a common story where, every time you're in a relationship, he's single, then he's in a relationship when you're single. When that soulmate is out of reach, there's a reason for that. They're usually holding space for you. In other words, they're keeping this conscious idea open that there's something better and greater for you, but they may not actually be the one that you're destined to hang out with. You have to listen to your soul. A lot of times soulmates show up to trade talents. So you'll have a soulmate that's really good at this thing and the other one is really good at that thing. And by being together, they learn each other's talents. And then as soon as the learning is over, it kind of dissolves. So sometimes they come back from past lives just to teach you something that they knew. Sometimes, and this is most always the case really, but sometimes it's the only part of it, the soulmate is here to remind us of who we are. And I think because we have, certain childhoods that are faded and we go down certain paths, you might have been, a great warrior in a past life, but this entire life you grew up in an orphanage and never even picked up a sword, right? It's not till you're with that particular soulmate that you were with in the lifetime that you were a warrior that you suddenly begin to awaken to certain tendencies inside of you. So sometimes soulmates come strictly to wake us up, to remind us of these parts of our personality, parts of our character, parts of our story that we simply haven't gotten to in this life yet. And literally, the universe is waking us up. In fact, anyone who is married to someone before the age of 30, I guarantee you they were a past life soulmate, and they've come to start the story and get you on your path and help you wake up. So in a soulmate situation, it can be very confusing at first. You have to take some time to get to know them and to wake up. And like I said, love will always come up. You have to ask yourself, where is this love going? But in every case, with every soulmate, everywhere, It really comes down to the way you are loving yourself. If you're loving yourself really high and really well, then you are only allowing people who love you the same way to be in your life. So with Venus retrograde at step 1 in Aries right now, that's really what's happening with all this soulmate kind of stuff, is the history of how well or not well you have stood up and loved yourself. Now, because Venus is in Aries, it's not just how well you've loved yourself, it's also what you've tended to chase after in love. It's also where your ego has gotten caught up in love or in the way of love. It's also stories of being strong in your love relationship and not losing yourself, and stories of sovereignty, being able to stay sovereign and a partner at the same time. So all these sorts of things are coming up, but what the universe is trying to get you to in a Venus retrograde is what you allow yourself to open up to and the way you love yourself. So between now and Sunday, and really it really starts today, you're going to be really answering the question of why, a lot of why questions. Why have I chased after this or that in life? Why have I behaved in relationships this way? Why have I treated myself in this way or that way? Why have I ignored myself and only cared about them? Why have I treated myself this way after a love situation began or ended? And Pallas is here, conjuncting Venus, to do that problem solving. Now, Pallas will actually be in Aries for 3 months. So this is the first beginning questioning of your behavior in love and what you open up to. And by the way, this isn't always applied to love relationships. This could be that you're in a job you don't love. You're in a job you don't love, you're not loving yourself very well. That you're in a life you don't love. If you're in a life you don't love, you're not loving yourself very well. So relationships are the most popular thing that we think of with love, but love is really everything the universe is based on. Now, at the same time, Juno, which I talked about earlier, conjuncting Pluto, is at the same time helping you transform what the ideal relationship is, quote, quote. So the ideal in the past might have just been someone who doesn't yell at you. And now you're like, you know what, the ideal has to be way higher than that. They have to be not only not yell at me, but be fascinating and passionate and loving and blah, blah, blah. So we're going to be transforming the rules of the ideal relationship, honestly, all year long. I mean, Juno stays in Capricorn nearly all year. This is why business and government, which is Capricorn, is under reorganization right now. And recognize, too, that because Pluto's conjuncting Juno, a lot of truths will come out that you might not have known or paid attention to before. A lot of boundaries might change, and nothing will really be solid until 2018. So just stand back and give yourself some space. So no matter what happens, my friend, here are my tips to getting through this little period. Try to observe your life. Try to be in the observation. Get out of the driver's seat, get some popcorn, and just watch the movie. When you are engaged with a soulmate situation, respond differently. Respond differently to them than you usually have. Respond differently to yourself than you usually have. You may not respond correctly when you respond differently, but responding differently does end the karma cycle. And try to figure out why. It's not more important of what or what's happening next or will my future be happy. It's more the question of why is this happening to me now? We have a timeout with the Venus retrograde. And my last point to you is to try to rise above the situation. No matter what the situation is, try to rise above it. This is a time where you want to bow your head and rise above. And don't worry, you may lose the battle, but Sensei says you will win the war. All right, my friend, I hope you have some good times ahead and great discovery here with this Venus retrograde. I'll be back tomorrow with more. Until then, remember, you can come on down to our Facebook club. It's at namastetoday.club. We've got a lot of great light walkers in there. You're free to bring up your own services. You're free to post your chart. People answer questions. It's a great community, so if you're feeling alone in this transit, come on down and hang out with us. I'll be back tomorrow with more. Until then, I love you, and live, love, be.
Live, love, be.